Welcome to the DSO Hygienist Podcast. This podcast is for everyone in the DSO space. Whether you're a hygienist, dentist, assistant, or leader, we're here to bring you expert insights, real-world strategies, and conversations to help you thrive. I'm your host, Christine Deal, and together we'll explore how to elevate patient care, grow professionally, and navigate the ever-evolving world of DSOs. Let's get started. Janis Sadoyama has spent over 16 years helping founders, entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders architect aligned brands from the inside out. Her philosophy is that a powerful personal brand isn't something you create, it's something you excavate. You start from experience, from everything you've already lived and built and learned, and you bring it to the surface in a way that finally makes sense to the people who need you most. Janis specializes in working with what she calls invisible experts, the highly qualified, deeply experienced people who are somehow still the best kept secret in their industry, and she helps them build brands that create real autonomy, real authority, and a whole lot more of the right opportunities. She's the founder of Stratum Brand Partners and the host of Launch My Brand Today podcast. I'd like to welcome Janis to the DSO Hygienist Podcast. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. I'm so excited to be here and to chat with you today.
I'm excited to have you as well because we met at Women in DSO, and I'll tell you, we just had that connection. I just know you're good people, and I'm so excited to talk about what you're doing with branding. I think a lot of us don't realize we are a brand in and of ourselves to some extent. So let's just get started with questions.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
There's a common belief that personal branding is really only for entrepreneurs or influencers. What would you say to the executive, mid-career professional, hygienist, dentist, as what's essentially anyone who works for someone else who thinks this just doesn't apply to them?
Ooh, okay. We're getting right into it because that's the beefiest question is, oftentimes people are like, well, I don't want to be an influencer. I work in an office. I'm a professional. I'm a dentist. I'm a business owner. I'm a founder. And the short answer is everybody has a personal brand, whether they took a hand in crafting it or not. So I always say if you don't have a hand in what is being publicly portrayed, you're doing your personal brand a disservice. We all have one, in our small circles within an organization, in a bigger circle, if you Google yourself, what are the results that show up? I know some people are like, oh, shoot, I haven't Googled myself in a while. So it's interesting to kind of take inventory of what your persona is being broadcasted out there, because ultimately, your personal brand in a professional sense should be thoughtful and curated to the opportunities you want to open up yourself to.
Yeah, and I think that's something we just don't think about. Someone's going to write your story if you don't get out there and write it yourself, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
So you work with people that you call invisible experts. Who are they? And why do some of the most qualified people end up being the hardest to find?
What's funny is that I think that people with expertise in a certain space, and I'll speak from personal experience too, where it's like you almost feel like your work will speak for itself. Like, I'm really good at what I do. People will notice, people will take note. But oftentimes you're so good at your job, it's almost like you're taken for granted a little bit in the professional sense, where it's like, oh, they do the thing. I don't know if you've ever been told like, oh, she does everything. She can do the thing. Give it to Christine. She is your go-to person. She'll take care of it. But what does it really look like to be known for something specific? It's very different to be like, Christine can take care of everything versus no, she is the problem solver when it comes to having challenging human-centered discussions. Like it hits very different than a blanket statement that somebody has created for you. So invisible experts, their credentials or their life experience speaks volumes, but when it comes to their visibility, whether it be online or in networking circles, they're not as seen as they should be.
Yeah, and that kind of the brings up kind of like the credentials. Some of these people are struggling to be the authorities that they actually are. So what is getting in people's way to get over that?
Ooh, I think again, I default always back to people think their work will speak for themselves. And if I just work harder, the leadership team or a boss will promote me or think of me for the next opportunity. Because why wouldn't they? You know, I've worked so hard, I've shown that I'm capable. But in reality, credentials, they tell people what you've done. It's a degree, and I'm not discounting that, but what's the uniqueness? What's your unique perspective that you bring to the table that, nobody else is considered because you have a different lens through life experience or job experience or personal experience, which I think adds weight and gravitas to your perspective. And I think that's the differentiating factor when you have colleagues that are, the same quote unquote level as you or credentials and professional space as you, but you have a unique look on things or you have a unique perspective that shifts you out of being considered the same. And I think that becomes your edge. It becomes your differentiator in that space. And I think when people get stuck, it's because they have a hard time articulating, what is my unique thing? Like I have a degree, you ask somebody, what do you do? And usually it's a list of credentials or it's a job title. And I think when you start to brush away the credentials and lead with a personal like your personal story or, why it is that you got into the field you're in, that becomes easier to clear that speed bump and put yourself out there in a way that you're visible for what you want to be known for.
Yeah, I think passion really can lead a lot to that. And what you're passionate about, maybe that's what you should lead with instead of the credentials.
Yeah. Or purpose is a good one too. I always say I love passion. I also love purpose because purpose will keep you going when passion gets hard, when you're like tired.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to keep up the passion.
Yeah.
So a lot of professionals inside companies or organizations, they borrow their identity from their employer's brand. So what's the risk in that? And what happens when the job changes?
Oof. Okay, Christine, this was probably the hardest pill for me to swallow, like professionally, because for more than half my life, I thought that the answer to career success was directly correlated to the company I worked for. I come from an advertising background, so I was like, okay, if I work for the big agency, I will have that agency name behind me. I become, like by proxy, I'm elevated because the agency I work at. But I was that was my track. I was at an agency and I was laid off. And what I thought was the umbrella, the metaphorical umbrella that was going to shelter me from the storm, it was non-existent, So I always think of it as like, it's like having personal brand insurance. Like we insure our cars and our homes for all these things that may happen, but sometimes we don't prioritize ourselves to have that insurance. Like if a layoff happens, if restructuring happens, and we see it every day. And it's really that autonomy from your company because, your titles will change. What happens when a company is acquired by another company? You don't necessarily have to absorb that blow personally if you go ahead and build alongside the company's brand. And some people are like, "Ooh, is that ethical?" And it's, I'll be honest with you. There's two ways to go about it. Like it's, oh, I'm just going to build this thing because I want to exit the company. And, that's not the answer. I think in a shady perspective, I think the answer is really like, if I can become a quality employee by educating myself and adding value, your company shines too, but I'm also developing myself personally. So it's almost like we're both rising together and being better for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like, what if the company gets a bad reputation?
Exactly.
And now you're connected to maybe something bad instead.
Yeah.
So, what's the moment or the pattern you see most often that finally makes someone realize their personal brand needs attention?
I have a brilliant client / friend who's actually a really good friend now, who told me, if you want to know the answer to anything, you have to think of when you're like the most emotional. So she's like, there will be emotional triggers, and then you have to follow that line backwards to why it's stirring something up inside of you. So it happens in a few ways, but I think of, if you're in a corporate environment, if you were passed up for a raise or a promotion and somebody else got it, or there's an instance where you're at a networking event and it's really hard to explain what you do so that the other person emotionally gets it. Like you can say a title, again, you can say your title, credential, but they glaze over and it's like, cool, you're like everybody else in the room. Or when you've kept your head down the entire time for years and you've, dedicated yourself to a company or an organization for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and you look up and you're like, what am I doing? Like, I have so much more to offer and I've kind of haven't been recognized for these things. So I guess to say it all kind of is built off of almost a frustration energy, knowing that you're meant to do more and share more. And I think a lot of people who lead multi-passionate lives and want to bring value to the people that they interface with, they have that like nagging behind them where it's like, you're meant to do more, whether that's a book, whether that's speaking, whether that's leadership roles, mentorship roles. It's that nagging feeling that there is more out there. And I really encourage people to follow that nag, because ultimately, I think further down the line, when you don't listen to it, it turns into regret, because you know that you can really make impact. And I'm not saying like millions of people. It could be small. It could be within your community. It could be within your organization. It could be starting your own business. Whatever that looks like, you're meant to put a stamp in the world. Like, why not you? Like you look at other people doing it, or you see maybe cohorts in your company doing it. And I think to sit in that discomfort a little bit and get curious about it is where the goodness lies, because to me, that's a sign that something needs to change or adjust or pay attention to, because you have something big to share.
Love that. I was given some advice one time. I was speaking and I was really scared and inside myself and thinking about me. And the person said to me, it's not about you. It's about the message. And I think if more people thought of it that way, they could get out of their own heads and not have to worry so much about what other people think and focus on what they have to give.
I love that so much. And that is such an important share, because I think even if you were to ask yourself in the moment of sharing something that your expertise, a story that would help somebody not go through the same steps as you, like to avoid a misstep, would you do it if it helped one person? And every single time the person is like, absolutely, I would share that if it would help just one person. And I think we lose sight of it sometimes because it's a lot to put yourself out there and to feel like you're in the spotlight. But if we can zoom out and just say, well, I'm doing this all in service of someone else or helping this message be shared, that becomes so much more powerful than the feelings that, like, we create these feelings sometimes in our own head. They're not in reality. So I think that's such a good anchor to come back to, is the story, like the message. What's the message?
Yeah. So you talk about excavation over creation. So what does that actually look like in practice, and why does that distinction matter so much?
Ooh, yes. And this is really, it's the core of kind of how I lead clients through the branding process and how I've built like my own brands. It's funny because people approach branding kind of like a construction project, like you're building a home. And I used to say that too, where it's like, yeah, 100% a home is like the foundation that you build and all those amazing things that you build on top of it. But really, when it comes to personal branding, it's excavation of it all. So I always say, like, I'm 50% brand archaeologist, 50% brand architect, because what we do is we dig through like your work history, you know, the things that really light you up, the through line from all the projects and the positions you've had and the job titles, because through it all, there's going to be a through line where it links things in sometimes obvious ways and sometimes in really like subtle, unobvious ways, which is always the coolest because there's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Like those are connected. Those are my favorite moments, by the way, is seeing like the big picture kind of come into focus of, wow, I have all this in me. What does it look like to build a business or a brand around that? Because it's so personal. Like everything that you've done, the life you've lived, the stories you can tell, they're so deeply personal. And I think being able to frame them in a way that puts you in the expert seat and in the driver's seat of where you want this to go is the most empowering thing, because it's all built on things you've already done. So it takes the heavy lift out of a lot of things, because oftentimes people think, oh my gosh, I have to create a persona and craft the story and do the thing. And that's really overwhelming because you're worried about how it's going to be perceived or what needs to be spoken to. And I think when we go backwards and it's like, okay, let's lead with what you know to be true, what you are looking to share with the world. I think it's like excavation is really just asking better questions. Like, what do people always come to you for? What's the problem that you're known for solving? I feel like that is where your point of view starts to take shape. And really, that's where the strongest brands are built.
So can your personal brand matter even if you're not looking for a new job, or maybe you're not trying to grow externally? What does it look like for you inside an organization?
Ooh, yes. And I think this might resonate for a lot of people, because a lot of people might just they're like, I'm happy. I'm good at where I'm at. I'm not looking for a job. I feel like you've seen on LinkedIn where it's like, when was the last time you were on LinkedIn? It's like, oh, when I was looking for potential job opportunities. But if you're happy, it's like, again, it's kind of like insurance. When you don't need it, you're like, what am I paying for? What am I doing with this thing? But then when something happens, you're so glad that you have it. I think within an organization, it's interesting because, and I work with a lot of founders and like C-suite individuals where they're sussing out who to invest in within their company that's going to help them grow, that is aligned with the company's ethos. And if you're an individual within a company and you're looking to kind of develop yourself and reach new milestones or expand, you're also doing that as an individual. You're not just doing it as a quote unquote employee. So what things do you want to start banking in your own brand that makes you marketable across the board? Forget the organization, beyond the organization. It's almost like legacy building. It's like, what do people come to you for? It also helps frame thought leadership and being considered when important decisions are being made. Like, I want you in the room. I want you to be there because I respect your opinion and you're going to offer a perspective that we may not consider. So sometimes it's not necessarily a title change or a position change, but it's, oh, we want you to come in because of your thoughtfulness and your attention to these nuances that other people aren't privy to, but your expertise is in that space. And I can't tell you how many times I've had clients who work for companies exit the company and they're asked to come back as consultants because they really crystallized what they're good at and how they can go in and troubleshoot the challenge as a whole, being from the inside, but then being able to kind of step back and be like, here's how we can help you from the outside. It's a really powerful move. I think it's also built from a non-frantic energy when you're not looking specifically for an opportunity, you're just looking to better yourself. I think we start getting, I mean, at least that's how I used to be in corporate, where it was like, okay, I know I have to apply for this job. Like, what do I have to amplify on my resume to make this stand out, versus leading by action instead of accolades or another bullet point on your resume, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And a lot of people, they're holding back from putting themselves out there because they don't want to seem self-promotional, which I think many people feel that way. I know I personally feel that way. So how do you help people get past that part of it?
Oh, okay. So I always say if you're providing value or you're sharing information, you should never feel yucky about it because you're leading. It's service versus promotion, right? You're here to help. You're doing it to assist somebody so that they didn't have to go through a challenging time that you've already been through. It's like, I've lived and learned this. Let me give you my quick start so you can skip steps 1 through 5. I've already done it. It doesn't work. And it's not to say that your methodology has to be like set in stone, but I think there's a lot of power in sharing your journey or your story because people will see themselves in you and the challenges that you've faced and how you navigated a situation that might spark something in them where they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. I think that if you always lean back into like, hey, I'm just here to help, it takes the pressure off of you feeling like, oh man, I'm selling something. It's like, no, could somebody genuinely benefit from this knowledge that I'm sharing? If the answer is yes, you shouldn't have that icky feeling because it's like, hey, whether we work together or not, I want you to have this information because it helped me. So I think human to human, it's like, how can you help other people navigate a challenging situation that you've already lived through and come out the other side? Or you could even be in progress and be like, hey, you know what? Let's do this thing together. Here's what I've learned. What's your experience been? So also like having a conversation takes the weight off of feeling self-promotional.
So how does a strong personal brand translate into tangible benefits, better opportunities, more influence, higher incomes, especially for someone who isn't trying to build a business?
Ooh, that one's a loaded question because I feel like a lot of times brand work feels abstract, right? Like, what's the physical trade-off? What's the thing? It's not like going into a store and buying something and walking out with a bag. It's really a longer trajectory. It really boils down to like the legacy you're building for yourself. And sometimes that word turns people off because they're like, oh, legacy, like I don't have kids or I don't, what am I leaving? But how do you want people to feel after they've experienced working with you or interfacing with you. It's the feeling that you leave people professionally, personally, all those things, where opportunities start to unlock for you. And I've seen it so many times where it's just, I mean, it sounds a little woo-woo, I think, right? Like, oh, like, okay, all these opportunities unlock. But when people, and I feel like, Christine, tell me if you've had this experience where you work with somebody or you meet somebody and you're like, oh, we get each other. There's a shorthand. I feel good about them. You know, that feeling stays top of mind when there's an opportunity, or, you know, people are looking for guests. It's like, oh my God, you'd be so great. Just one, your expertise in the field, but two, just the way your reputation has like preceded you. So I also think it's like, forget like building a business. It also adds to that confidence factor. It's building blocks of confidence of, that's how you filter into everything else that you do. It's like, oh, I can do the thing. So I can ask for a higher position within my company because I've done X, Y, and Z, because I have a unique thought leadership track that I have built for myself and I've had conversations around. It's that specialness. It's like the special sauce, right? That only you can bring to the table. And regardless of what you want to do professionally, I feel like that adds to every experience you have as a human. Like, how do you want to, you can go through this life however which way you choose. It's, if you have things that are directly within your control, what do you want to do with that? And I think it's such a fun place to be because you can have it reflect how you are as a human.
I like the legacy part that you brought up, because I think we do sometimes think of legacy as like, oh, I'll do that when I'm old, or that happens when I'm older. But I do think what you said about how do you want people to feel after you've worked with them, if we all kind of thought about that in our interactions, we'd probably have a lot more positive interactions, that's for sure.
I love that. And I think too, especially in the business that you're in, where it's so much of it is relationships and how people interact with one another. It's so simple. It's right. It goes back to like, treat people the way you want to be treated. It's so simple, but there's so much weight that is attached to that. And I think at the core of it, you could break down any business, any brand. What's the feeling you want people to leave after they've experienced it? If we really put weight on that, how much more, not only profitable, but how much more loyalty would you have as a consumer to a company where you're like, oh no, that company cares. I see it from every level of their organization. It makes the consumer feel good. It makes the people working at the organization feel good. I feel like it's a win-win when we kind of take stock and evaluate how we can position feeling and relationships within anything we do.
Yeah. So for someone sitting in a corporate role right now who feels a little invisible or undervalued, what's the very first thing they should do?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what the first thing that usually happens is they start posting like fervently on LinkedIn. That's usually the first, the first go-to is like, oh, I have to be more visible. Which I would say, don't do that. Like, let's find your voice first. Let's find like what you really, I always say like building a brand comes from the inside outward. So it's like, what do you feel deeply about? Like going back to passion and purpose. It's all right, let's get still for a second. And it could be as easy as talking to colleagues or talking to people that you trust, mentors. What would you say that would be my strong suit? What's my strong suit? If you can't articulate it yourself, it's always nice to go to people that you trust and kind of pick their brain a little bit and be like, and you could be completely honest, it's like I'm struggling to find my voice and my through line. Like, could we talk through this? And I'm here for it. Like, by the way, I would love to have that conversation with anybody, because I feel like too often we don't get a chance to reflect on our bios until somebody asks for it. So it's like, oh, what have I done in the last 10, 15, 20 years? And I think it's interesting to always kind of revisit that. I would also say, like, look back into your positions or your roles and job titles, and it's where did you feel like you were contributing the most, and what lit you up in that space? Because again, the things that the high emotional outputs, like, okay, let's follow the line backwards. Where did it come from? Where can we get more of it? How can we amplify that light and that goodness in a way that will carry us forward too? So I would say, don't worry so much about the LinkedIn headline or the bio, but really just start kind of inward diving into, okay, what am I really good at? What do people come to me for? And, for some people too, it might be, these people are coming to me for all these things and I don't like doing this thing. So it could also be a shift of like, okay, they come to me for this, but how can I position it in a way where they really come to me for that, like a different thing, which is also sometimes where we get stuck. Like, we're told we're so good at this one thing, and that one thing, yes, we might be really good at it, but we're really good at it because of something else. And I know that sounds ambiguous, but like, for example, somebody, like, I would have a lot of people refer me and say, Janis can do everything. Like, she's your go-to girl for website branding stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. So I actually don't love doing websites, but I can 100% do it. What I'm really good at is having these discovery calls and mapping out what it looks like to showcase your most genuine self in a business professional manner so that people understand your essence when they go to your website. There's a big difference between being a website developer and a brand builder. So it's those nuances, I think, that we should get curious about, because yes, you can do a lot of things. We all can. Like, I'm sure, like, you wear so many hats, but it's really, what are you really good at? And where do you want to amplify that more and have more visibility in? Because I think that creates longevity in an organization, in a business. But I think just on a human level, it makes us feel good and feel valued. And, we're putting our most genuine self forward. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think in business and personally, like, to lead with that authenticity is also a word that gets thrown around a lot, but to lead with our truest self, what a gift, like, what a gift in this world.
Yeah. And I think we all have to remember, there's some rooms we just don't need to be in.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
You're not going to be for everybody, and that's okay.
I love that you say that, because it's true. And if you are, everyone's like, oh, but everybody's my clients. And it's like, well, then we should probably work on getting a little bit clearer, because are they your dream client? Do you, like, if you had 100 of them, would it still excite you? So I love that you said that, because it really is a discernment process, and how you work together and how you feel.
Well, thank you so much, Janis, for being on the show today. If any of our listeners would be interested in learning more about you or getting in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, I love this. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And, you said it earlier, we met at Women in DSO. We hit it off like gangbusters, because it's just like, you find your people. And that is a testament to Christine's personal brand, because she lives it. So thank you for that. I have a website called the StratumBrandPartners.com, and it is really for executives, founders, leaders who are in their space, who are looking to do just this. Like, let's dive into your personal, professional expertise and how do we bring that to the surface and help you build brand around that. You can find me on socials. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chit chat or troubleshoot or I call them like brand therapy sessions, where we just talk about like, where are you at in the process? And it's exciting. It's really just giving you the keys to be in the driver's seat of wherever you want to go.
Thanks again for being on the DSO Hi Janis podcast today, Janis.
Thanks so much, Christine.
Thank you for listening to the DSO Hi Janis podcast. Please follow or subscribe to be alerted of new episodes.